He forgot to run the dishwasher again this week. Not because he genuinely cannot operate a dishwasher. He runs complex spreadsheets at work every single day. But somehow at home, the same buttons feel impossibly confusing to him every single time without fail. His partner sighs quietly, does it herself once again, and quietly adds one more small task to a mental list that genuinely never seems to get any shorter at all. This is not simple clumsiness. This is not honest forgetting. Psychologists and relationship researchers have started calling this specific pattern something far more precise and clinically useful. And once you learn to consciously recognize it, you will start seeing it absolutely everywhere. That IT is called weaponized incompetence, sometimes also referred to more formally as strategic incompetence in academic literature. It describes a pattern where a person performs a task poorly or claims genuine confusion about how to do it correctly, specifically so that someone else steps in and simply takes over the responsibility permanently instead. Crucially, this is often not a fully conscious, deliberate manipulation. Many people who do this were never explicitly taught these particular tasks growing up, and they genuinely have not developed real competence in them. But the deeper psychological pattern lies in what happens directly afterward. Rather than actually learning the skill through repetition and practice, the person simply lets someone else quietly absorb the responsibility every single time, and the underlying incompetence conveniently never actually improves. Here is the key detail that makes this pattern so remarkably effective and so deeply frustrating for the other person involved. The exact same individual who claims total confusion about how to properly load a dishwasher, fold laundry correctly, or plan a simple children's birthday party can often demonstrate genuinely impressive competence in other, unrelated areas of life. They can master complicated software at work, remember detailed sports statistics without effort, or successfully plan an elaborate group vacation down to the smallest logistical details. The incompetence, in other words, is often selectively applied to precisely the tasks the person would rather simply avoid doing altogether. Researchers who study relationship dynamics point to a specific concept called the mental load to help explain why this pattern causes such disproportionate, cumulative, long-term damage over the course of a relationship. The mental load refers to the largely invisible cognitive work of noticing something needs attention, remembering it clearly, planning exactly how to address it, and then actually following through consistently. When one partner performs weaponized incompetence, they are not just avoiding the physical task itself. They are quietly avoiding the entire underlying mental load as well, leaving their partner to carry the full invisible weight of remembering, planning, and following up every single time, indefinitely, with no real end in sight. This pattern shows up constantly beyond just romantic households, and it rarely gets discussed nearly as openly in those other contexts. In workplaces, an employee might consistently submit a report full of small, avoidable errors, prompting a manager or a more competent coworker to simply take over that task entirely going forward. In friend groups, one person might always somehow forget their wallet at the exact moment the bill arrives at the table, relying entirely on the group's collective embarrassment to smooth things over every single time without any real consequence. In each case, the underlying dynamic remains functionally identical. Genuine incompetence would eventually improve naturally through repeated practice and honest feedback, but this particular kind of incompetence conveniently never does, because there is simply no real incentive for it to ever change. Parenting offers perhaps the most visible and most widely discussed example of this entire pattern. One parent frequently dresses a child in badly mismatched clothing, forgets to properly pack the school lunch, or somehow cannot ever seem to correctly locate the pediatrician's phone number when it is genuinely needed. Over time, the other parent quietly stops delegating these specific tasks altogether, reasoning it is simply faster and considerably less stressful to just handle everything personally rather than deal with the recurring frustration and cleanup involved. What looks on the surface like a fairly reasonable, practical division of household labor is often, underneath, the direct and predictable result of one parent's repeated, convenient underperformance that Oh, why does this pattern develop and persist so consistently and so reliably in the first place? Psychologists point to several overlapping and mutually reinforcing explanations. Sometimes it stems directly from unequal upbringing, where one sibling was actively taught essential household and life skills, while another sibling was quietly excused from learning them entirely, based on outdated and unfair gendered assumptions about who should naturally handle which specific responsibilities. Other times, it is powerfully reinforced through simple operant conditioning. The very first time someone performs a task poorly and another person immediately steps in to competently fix it, both people unconsciously learn a clear and durable lesson. The person who struggled learns that visible struggle reliably results in the task disappearing from their plate entirely. And the person who stepped in and fixed it learns that stepping in is simply faster and easier than calmly addressing the underlying pattern directly. So the exhausting cycle quietly repeats itself over and over for months or even years at a stretch. There's also a real, meaningful difference between someone who is genuinely still learning a specific skill and someone actively practicing weaponized incompetence. And that difference matters considerably for how you should choose to respond. A person who is truly still learning generally shows visible, measurable improvement over time when given clear feedback, and they tend to feel some authentic discomfort about consistently relying on someone else. A person practicing weaponized incompetence, in sharp contrast, shows little to no meaningful improvement even after repeated correction and clear feedback, and often seems entirely comfortable or even quietly relieved whenever someone else steps in to competently handle it for them once again. There's a useful diagnostic question that therapists sometimes suggest asking directly. Would this exact same person struggle just as visibly with this exact same task if their own boss, their own parent, or someone they were genuinely trying hard to impress was watching them closely at that very moment? In many documented cases, the honest answer turns out to be a clear and immediate no, revealing that the underlying skill was actually present in the person the entire time, simply not consistently applied within the specific relationship where it mattered most. The emotional cost of this pattern tends to accumulate slowly and quietly over time rather than appearing all at once in a single dramatic moment or blowout argument. The partner who consistently absorbs the mental load rarely explodes immediately over one single missed dishwasher cycle or one forgotten task. Instead, resentment tends to build up gradually, task by task, week by week, until it eventually erupts, often over something that looks completely minor and disproportionate on the surface, but is actually representing months or even years of quietly accumulated, unaddressed frustration finally reaching its breaking point. Addressing this pattern effectively generally requires shifting the conversation clearly and specifically away from vague, abstract complaints about laziness or general carelessness, and toward direct, concrete, specific accountability instead. Rather than simply doing the task yet again out of pure convenience and sheer exhaustion, relationship researchers consistently recommend clearly naming the specific pattern out loud, calmly setting a clear and genuinely reasonable expectation going forward, and then honestly allowing the natural consequences of an undone task to actually occur, rather than immediately and automatically rescuing the situation once again like clockwork. Recognizing weaponized incompetence does not mean assuming the absolute worst about every single person who genuinely struggles with a task or two from time to time. Real learning curves and honest, ordinary human limitations genuinely do exist for everyone, without exception. But when the exact same convenient confusion always seems to apply specifically to tasks a person would rather simply avoid altogether, while genuine, effortless competence appears everywhere else in their life without any struggle at all, it is well worth taking a much closer, more honest look at what is actually happening underneath the surface. If this finally explains a dynamic you have personally lived through, hit like, share it with a partner, roommate, or coworker who needs to see it, and subscribe for more real psychology explained clearly.